Ladies and gentlemen, prepare your finest coffee. I'm going to show you a little bit about how this stuff is actually put together, and we're going to work on something called Codicillus from the next album. Alright, so today we're going to look a little bit at Codicillus, which comes from the next album. Basically, a lot of what I do is mostly very melodically oriented, but for this I wanted to show a little bit of something that was built a little bit more from the ground up with percussion. A lot of times what I'll do is sample myself doing a particular, maybe 2 or 4 bar phrase. And it could be on anything, it could be on found objects. This actually came from me just tapping on the guitar, and you can hear it here. And basically what I had was this whole thing, but it wasn't really on with the click. I kind of tend to not really play to the click. Sometimes I'll use it as a very, very rough kind of reference. And then I build percussion tracks over the top of that to give this, because this is a loop, obviously. And so what I'll do is add, other found objects over the top of that. So you can hear that. And then in addition to that, Udo, I think is the name of it, but anyways, it's basically like a lower percussion sound. It's got some bass in it, and I had to move that around to actually move with the track in terms of I couldn't just play one note or whatever, because it had to move with the bass. You can hear it move there, but it's pretty, it sounds like a sample by itself, but what I did was add another kind of transient attack over the top of that to give it a little bit more of a live flavor. And so then you have that, and you got this and the other thing and whatever, so you got you end out with something that has a much more kind of, almost like a live percussionist, really. It would be interesting to actually hear it along with the click, just because the click is off, and you'll notice that. It's like in a different time signature. I think one of the biggest keys to making your productions, alive and really moving, especially if you're working alone like I am a lot of the time, is to actually not follow the click. And that requires it requires a lot of work. I mean, years ago, working with the first group, we built clicks for the entire album, and that's pretty common. But for a lot of the stuff I do now, I really try to play it completely off of that and not follow it. And I'll put in tempo maps where I can, and where it's really needed to get to the next section. I'll show you a bit of that in a minute. So then this is the actual full track with the guitar and synthesizers and everything here. Here's an exact example where I had to do a tempo adjustment going into the next section. The part before it was played off time, and so by the time I actually got to the transition of the next section, I basically didn't have a 1. So I had to figure out a way to change the meter up and then actually change the time signatures. You've got like ridiculous things like 610, and stuff like that to get to the next section. And I'll go ahead and play a little bit of that transition here. And with the click, it's like this. see there, probably can't see it because I don't have a screencast, but I've got a ridiculous amount of changing meters in this section, and so I'll go ahead and play that along with the click. Flashback to the whole discussion of percussion and adding transients over the top to give things more live sound. There's a lot of different things you can do with plugins these days that I really don't do. I tend to do this in an organic kind of fashion and layer sounds, probably in a more old school approach, I suppose. But one of the problems I had here, we're going to transfer this over from percussion to actual melodic instruments, is I have a glockenspiel, but I kind of wanted to get a more of a vibe kind of sound. But still keep the nice attack of the Glock. So the Glock by itself sounds a bit like this. So there's one example, and then I have this sample underneath it. Which would obviously be a little bit, you know, not as real sounding without the two together. And then full on with the guitar and everything. One of the key tricks to sort of working off the grid is really becoming in tune with yourself, I think, as a musician and, you know, as a performer. There's obviously lots of editing that happens and you can do, but when it comes down to it, that's going to be, if you could spend your entire life editing yourself, you know. So you really want to, you know, zone in to what the feel of the music actually is. And sometimes, you know, it feels like you get lucky. I had an oboist come in here and an overdub on the next part, and had the part written out and everything, and she just played it perfectly, you know. It was just wonderful, and there is a bit of a rhythm to it, so there's not like this real tendency to totally get off, but there's a lot of elements in this music where if one isn't completely in tune with what's going on musically, you know, you're gonna need some kind of guide, at least to get you from one section to the next a lot of times. And working with digital stuff, it's easier obviously than working with tape. I mean, if you look back at older productions, there's lots of discussions about that. And when you're working like this, how do you keep a tempo map? How do you keep things going and really, you know, not only have a production that really breathes and sounds great at the end result, but how do you just play everything, you know, and keep going? This is an example of a part I really like, and not a lot of extra, I'd say, transient stuff going on here, but a more subdued part. But yeah, here we go.